Hey everyone, it's Dr. NightStare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. My body knew how to grow babies, welcoming life with an easy rhythm. Frida came first, a gentle presence from the moment I felt her move, and her birth was quick, almost effortless. Holding her small body close for the first time filled me with a completeness I had never imagined possible. Then Harry arrived, a whirlwind of energy even before he left my womb. A spirited child whose cries tested my patience through many sleepless nights. Yet cradling him against my chest brought a fierce, instinctual protectiveness that grounded me. Poppy completed our family, a calm child who smiled readily. Her bright eyes made our home feel warm. Each pregnancy had unfolded with perfect rhythm. Each birth affirmed my mothering heart. I loved my 3 children, Frida, Harry, and Poppy, with a love that felt limitless. Watching them grow, seeing their unique spirits thrive, made my world feel perfect and whole. I knew then that my family was complete. My heart understood there would be no more children, for I had everything I desired. My certainty shattered when I knew a 4th child was growing inside me. The dread of Alex arriving felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, a constant, suffocating pressure that tightened my throat. My body still worked with its accustomed rhythm, growing life with effortless ease, but my mind raged against it, a storm of unwanted thoughts and desperate fears that clawed at my composure. The pains started suddenly, just like before, and Alex came into the world quickly, a rush of warmth and fluids that my body delivered without effort or protest. The nurse placed the baby in my arms, a tiny, squalling infant, but I recoiled immediately, pushing the bundle away with a force I did not know I possessed. The room began to sway around me, the bright lights above blurring into an indistinct haze, and the walls seemed to melt and run together. The sound of the baby's cries twisted into sharp, discordant notes, then fractured into a cacophony of meaningless noise that clawed at my brain. My own skin felt strange and disconnected from my bones, and I could no longer tell where my body ended and the air began. Everything spun faster, pulling me into a void, and the world dissolved into pure, formless darkness. I opened my eyes to harsh fluorescent light and the stark white of a hospital ceiling. My body felt distant, a heavy weight I could not command. I tried to move my fingers, to shift my head, but nothing responded. Only my eyes moved, darting around the small room. Then I saw him, Michael, sitting beside my bed. His face showed the passage of 11 years. He looked older and tired, almost a stranger, but his hand reached for mine. His touch felt alien, yet offered some comfort, I remembered. He spoke my name, his voice thick with a grief I did not yet understand. "You're awake," he breathed. His words held relief. A deep sadness accompanied them. 11 years, he whispered. The number hung in the air, a cruel, impossible truth. My mind struggled to grasp this. 11 years? Where were my children? Frida, Harry, Poppy, Alex? I tried to ask, but my throat was dry, my voice locked away. Michael looked at me, his eyes full of pain. "The doctors say it was a neurological event," he explained. His words were careful and deliberate. "You never woke up after the incident." A dread began to coil in my stomach. "The children," I managed to croak, a raw, broken sound. He closed his eyes, then opened them again, gazing at me with desperate tenderness. "They're not real, Sarah," he said, his voice barely audible. "None of them." The words struck me. My memories broke apart. He explained more, a horrific confession pouring from him. When you fell into the coma, the doctors said there was no hope for you. I wanted a family. I wanted your children. He swallowed hard. His face showed regret and anguish. I used your frozen eggs. IVF. Your body was stable enough for the pregnancies. It was me, Sarah. I decided. My mind reeled. I tried to reconcile the vivid life I had lived, the pains, the births, the children I held, with this monstrous confession. My pregnancies were not real. My children were not mine. They were strangers, grown in my unconscious body, conceived by a decision I never made. The joy, the struggle, the fierce love, all of it was a lie, a result of my damaged brain. My babies, my Frida, Harry, Poppy, and Alex were ghosts. They were products of a stolen autonomy, a mother's greatest loss. This was a waking nightmare. You need to understand this now. I am being hunted, and there is no escape for me. I feel its presence everywhere, a constant pressure just beyond my sight. Each shadow holds a threat, and every unexpected sound makes my heart leap into my throat. It has found me, it will not stop. I know this with a certainty that chills me to my bones. This fear is a cold truth that settles deep inside me, a truth I cannot shake away. I cannot outrun it. I cannot hide from it. It always knows where I am. My time is running out, and this story is about the end, not survival. It began with small signs, then it became a shadow, then a presence. Now it is a certainty. The morning bus followed its usual winding path through the city streets. I watched buildings and people pass, a familiar blur of the everyday. The seats around me filled with other commuters lost in their routines. Then I saw him sitting across the aisle. His clothes were dark and worn, with cuffs and collar frayed. His face had many deep lines, and his skin had a gray color. His hair was sparse and stringy. What stopped me was his gaze. His eyes were wide open and fixed on my face. He did not blink. They held an intense, unwavering focus, a singular attention meant only for me. I tried to look away, turning my head toward the window, but I felt his stare pressing down on me. It pulled my attention back to him. He did not move. He did not shift his focus. The other passengers talked or looked at their phones, unaware of the disturbing confrontation happening a few feet away. His unblinking eyes seemed to penetrate me, removing the comfort of the routine journey. A cold chill spread through me despite the warmth inside the bus cabin. His gaze felt relentless and intrusive, a silent violation of my personal space. My heart started to beat faster, panic growing in my chest. He watched me until my stop arrived. Every moment felt extended, his presence inescapable. I moved past the other passengers and exited the bus, stepping onto the sidewalk. The brisk morning air outside felt cold and thin, offering no relief. The memory of his intense, fixed stare lingered, leaving a deep disturbance in the ordinary morning. My shift at the grocery store was nearing its end. I scanned items across the counter. The fluorescent lights made a drone above me. A long line of customers stretched back through the aisles. My mind drifted, trying to shake the memory of the man on the bus. Then I saw him again at the front of the queue. His clothes were the same dark, worn fabric, the cuffs frayed. His face had deep lines and a gray pallor. His eyes were wide and unblinking, fixed on me with that stare that was familiar and intense. My breath caught in my throat. He stepped forward, ignoring the other customers. He leaned over the counter, his voice a sound that was low and raspy and carried through the store. "There you are," he said. His words were clear and unwavering. "I knew I would find you eventually. All this time, all this searching, you cannot hide from me anymore." My hands trembled, fumbling with a jar of pickles. The other customers paused. Their conversation stopped. Their eyes turned to us, a growing circle of faces. A young woman dropped her basket. Oranges rolled across the floor, making soft thuds. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. His gaze pierced through me, stripping away any sense of normalcy. "It has been a long hunt," he continued. His voice rose slightly, a rough quality entering his tone. "But I always find what I am looking for. Always. You belong to me now." A woman near the front of the line made a gasp. A man behind her muttered about security. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor. The checkout line, usually a place of transactions, became an exposed stage. I could not move. I could not run. I was trapped behind the counter, my terror on full display for everyone to see. The silence in the store grew tighter. His words echoed, each one shattering my sense of safety. He watched me. His smile was triumphant and terrible, slowly spreading across his lips. It was a smile of possession. He held my gaze for another long moment. No one moved. No one spoke. The air thickened with unspoken alarm. Then, slowly, he straightened up. He turned from the counter and walked away, not looking back. He melted into the aisles at the back of the store, leaving me frozen. The world outside the encounter faded. There was only him, his accusations, and the inescapable truth that he had found me. The fear settled deep, a heavy weight in my chest. The encounter at the store left me shaken and cold. I stumbled home, my hands fumbling with the keys. Every lock clicked into place. I checked the windows, pulling down the blinds and latching each one. The world outside felt distant, yet his image burned in my mind. The phrase, "You belong to me now," echoed in my ears. I walked through my apartment, a desperate need for safety pressing down on me. I wanted to believe I was secure, that four walls and locked doors could keep him out. The darkness in my home offered no comfort. It felt like a cover for something waiting. I sat on my couch, my breathing shallow and fast. Sleep would not come. Every creak of the building, every rustle of leaves outside, sounded like footsteps approaching. My nerves were stretched tight. I kept seeing his unblinking eyes, his terrible smile. The air in my apartment grew cold, a creeping chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Then I heard it. A whisper, just at the edge of hearing, seemed to drift from the bedroom. My heart stopped. It was not a sound from outside. It was a voice, a dry, raspy voice. It said my name. I froze on the couch, unable to move. A new kind of terror took hold, far worse than the fear on the bus or in the store. This was my home, my private space. I stood slowly, my legs feeling weak. I walked to the bedroom door, each step a struggle. The darkness inside the room seemed deeper than before. Then the whisper came again, clear now, from the corner by my bed. "You belong to me now." The words filled the room. The same voice I heard at the checkout. He was here. He had been waiting. There was no escape. My mother gave me the box of summer school books, telling me Mr. Davies expected them delivered to Ethan Wilder before noon. Mr. Davies was my English teacher. He had called our house directly, knowing I lived only a few blocks from Ethan. My mother always said yes to teachers. Ethan Wilder was known around town. He lived in the isolated house on the edge of the woods, and everyone called him eccentric. I did not want to go. The sun beat down, turning the box hot in my hands. The walk felt long. I hated summer school and resented carrying evidence of it to anyone, especially Ethan. I reached his porch. The paint on the house peeled in long strips. Weeds grew tall and tangled in the flower beds. I knocked on the door, then knocked again. The door creaked open. Ethan stood there, gaunt. His pale face had sunken eyes. A wide strip of gray duct tape covered his mouth. His hair was long and matted. He wore dirty jeans and a torn shirt. My hand tightened on the box. He stared at me for a moment, then his eyes darted to the books in my hands. He extended a bony hand and gripped my arm. His fingers felt cold. He pulled me into the house. I stumbled forward, dropping the books onto a worn rug. The door shut behind me with a solid thud. A terrible smell hit me. It was the smell of something rotten, something dead, and something else I could not place. The air felt thick and heavy. Ethan still gripped my arm, his eyes wide and fixed on my face. He tugged me deeper into the house, away from the doorway. My mind raced with confusion and alarm. Ethan pulled me forward, away from the doorway and into a large living room. My eyes instantly fixed on the walls, and a new wave of horror washed over me. Every surface was covered in scarlet markings, stretching from the floorboards to the ceiling, a disturbing tapestry of dark red characters. They were not letters from any language I had ever seen. The symbols twisted upon the plaster, and they shifted their forms with a slow, deliberate motion as my gaze moved across them. The intricate lines and jagged edges seemed to pulse with a horrifying vitality. My vision blurred around the edges, then sharpened with an unnatural intensity, locking on to the overwhelming pattern. A strange, almost physical pressure began to build inside my head. These characters, etched in stark red, coiled and untwisted before my eyes, creating a disorienting effect that made the room feel as if it were breathing around me. The air grew heavier, pressing in, and the smell of decay intensified, but now it carried an additional metallic tang, like old, dried blood. A powerful confusion filled my mind, scrambling my thoughts. I tried to make sense of the markings, but their forms defied understanding, slipping away the moment I thought I had grasped them. A deep dread rooted itself in my chest, a cold, sickening fear that vibrated through my bones, but an equally strong, insistent fascination rose to meet it. It was a bizarre, terrifying allure, drawing me closer to the walls, compelling my attention in a way nothing had ever done before. I felt a terrible pull towards the scarlet symbols. My muscles tightened, and my fingers curled into a fist, then opened, trembling slightly. An overwhelming, frightening urge began to bloom within me. I needed to trace those lines. I needed to scratch those very shapes onto something. I felt a desperate, growing need to replicate them, to make them myself, to see them appear under my own hand. The thought was repulsive, yet undeniably powerful, buzzing beneath my skin like a swarm of angry insects. It was not a thought I chose. It was a command the walls had placed within me. Ethan released my arm. He gestured vaguely at the walls with one bony hand, his eyes wide and fixed on the scarlet script. His voice came out as a rasp, dry and cracked from disuse or perhaps from something worse. "Parents," he said, the sound barely a whisper. "They made a mess." He shook his head slowly, and his gaze lingered on a particular section of the wall, one dense with interlocking, jagged shapes, as if he understood the language of those horrifying words. The terrible urge to carve those very shapes into something still gripped me tightly. Ethan released my arm. He gestured at the walls with one bony hand, his eyes wide and fixed on the scarlet script. His voice was a dry, cracked rasp. "Parents," he said, barely a whisper. "They made a mess." His gaze lingered on a wall section dense with interlocking, jagged shapes. The terrible urge to carve those shapes still gripped me. Ethan turned and walked towards a dark hallway. I followed him. The smell intensified with every step, a cloying sweetness mixed with the rot. The air grew thick, difficult to breathe. The words on the living room walls pressed in behind me, their silent commands echoing. Ethan opened a door at the hall's end. He stepped through. I hesitated, then followed him into the room. This was the kitchen. Counters were covered in dried, dark stains. A whiteboard leaned against the far wall. It was covered in Ethan's cramped, frantic writing. I saw phrases like, "Lula is good, the walls need more. It's the sickness, and Lula wants new words." Other words were scratched out, smeared, or overlapped. The board was a chaotic record. Ethan pointed to the whiteboard with a finger stained dark red, then motioned towards the stairs. He was eager for me to see something else. I climbed the steps behind him. The thick carpet muted my footfalls. Each step felt heavy. My stomach churned with a growing dread. The upstairs hall was dark. The air here was heavier, saturated with metallic sweet odor. The words reappeared on these walls. Here, they were not just carved into plaster. Outlines were scratched directly into wallpaper. Some sections peeled back, revealing words scored deeply into bare drywall. The scarlet lines glowed in the dim light. Ethan stopped at the first door and pushed it open. I looked inside. 2 figures lay on the floor. They were naked. Their bodies were slender, covered in the scarlet words. The words were carved into their skin, a network of shallow, bleeding lines that covered their chests, arms, and legs. Their faces were contorted, their eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. One was Ethan's mother, pale hair recognizable. The other was his father. Sticky, dark red blood seeped from cuts, forming small puddles on the worn rug. Their hands covered in carved symbols, each hand raised towards the adjacent wall. Their fingers were stained crimson. I saw tools lying on the floor beside them. An old carving knife, a broken ceramic shard, a rusty screwdriver. The walls surrounding them were dense with scarlet. The words here were dense, intricate, and deep. The parents had cut themselves, then pressed their bloody bodies against the plaster, transferring carvings from their skin directly onto the walls. This scene was a ritual, a grotesque act of self-mutilation and inscription. Ethan pulled my arm, urging me onward. He led me past the parents' room to another door at the hall's end. This door was smaller, painted a faded pastel yellow. My heart pounded. He opened it slowly, revealing a small room. This was a nursery. A broken crib stood in the corner, its bars splintered. The rocking horse lay on its side, one eye missing. The wallpaper here was covered in scarlet words. They were smaller, delicate, weaving around cartoon animals that had been part of a cheerful border. A small, folded blanket lay on the floor in the room's center. It was stained with dark red, the same color as the words. Ethan knelt and picked it up. He held it out to me. The blanket was soft yellow flannel, covered in more carved symbols. Crude symbols marked it. "Baby Lula," Ethan whispered, his voice cracked. "She had the sickness first." He dropped the blanket. It landed on the floor. The scarlet words on its fabric twitched in the oppressive air. The nursery walls pressed in, making the room feel small and wrong. The terrible urge within me to carve those shapes, to become part of the writing, had grown stronger. Luke staggered back from the blanket, away from Ethan and the overwhelming presence of Lula's words. The need to escape was an all-consuming fire in his gut. He turned blindly, shoving past Ethan, who stood motionless by the crib, his eyes still fixed on the floor. Luke stumbled out of the nursery and down the dark hallway, past the open door of the parents' room where the carved bodies lay. The metallic scent of blood clawed at his throat, and the scarlet words on the walls seemed to writhe, eager to pull him back. He pounded down the stairs, ignoring the twisting walls of the living room, the grotesque script pulsing and twisting. He fumbled with the front door latch, his hands trembling, the metal cold and unresponsive for a terrifying second, and then it yielded. He yanked the door open and burst outside, gasping for air that felt thin and clean after the suffocating stench within. He ran. He did not look back at the peeling house, at the tangled weeds, or at the dark doorway. He just ran down the cracked pavement, his lungs burning, his legs pushing him further and further away from the nightmare behind him. He ran all the way home, past his own porch and straight into his bathroom. He ripped off his clothes, letting them fall in a heap, and stepped into the shower, turning the water on full blast. He scrubbed at his skin until it was red and raw, trying to wash away the cloying smell, the feel of the words, the memory of what he had seen. When he finally stepped out, dripping wet and shivering, he wrapped a towel around his waist. He looked at his arm, expecting to see only soap and water. But then he saw it. A distinct scarlet word was carved into the flesh of his left forearm. It was small, no larger than his thumb. The lines were thin, precise, and still fresh, not yet scabbed over. It was an impossible mark. He traced the symbol with a trembling finger. The skin around it felt hot and alive. It was one of Ethan's words, an incomprehensible glyph, now etched into his own body. The immediate terror of the house receded, but the word on his arm remained, a constant, burning reminder. He tried to ignore it, to forget, but the symbols on the wilder walls had done their work. The urgent need to replicate them, which had pulsed beneath his skin in Ethan's living room, began to return. It started subtly, a vague unease, a flickering image behind his eyes. Soon it grew into an irresistible craving, a physical ache that throbbed in his bones. He saw the patterns everywhere, in the cracks of the ceiling, in the grain of the wooden floorboards, in the tangled shapes of his own bed sheets. Each pattern was a whisper, a silent invitation to pick up a tool, any tool, and carve. He fought it. He squeezed his eyes shut and gripped his hands until his knuckles were white. But the compulsion was a living thing inside him, growing stronger with every passing minute. His own home, once a place of safety, began to twist. The familiar walls of his bedroom seemed to shift, imperceptibly at first, then with more certainty. He noticed a new door, small and dark, appearing in the corner of his closet, where there had only been a plain wall before. He knew it was a new structure. Then another, this one a pale yellow, appeared opposite his desk, its surface smooth and unblemished, yet inexplicable. These doors were silent, closed, and utterly wrong. He walked past them, touching their smooth surfaces, feeling a strange resonance, a connection to the horror he had witnessed. He knew, with a terrible certainty, that they led nowhere good. The house was changing. His mind was changing. The words had taken root, and now they were growing. He felt the cold touch of a carving tool in his mind, and a familiar, faint scent of old blood began to drift through his own once clean air. He lifted his marked arm, looking at the symbol that now defined him. The wall sickness had spread. It lived within him now, urging him to write. The morning sun warmed my face inside the tent. I heard students laughing near the lake. Birds chirped in the surrounding pine trees. Our school trip felt peaceful. A soft breeze rustled the leaves above me. I started to pack my bag. Then a guttural roar tore through the air outside. The ground vibrated with heavy thuds. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. A massive shadow fell across the tent flap. A terrible growl ripped through the fabric, followed by the sound of tearing canvas. Something large tore at the tent beside mine. Screams erupted. I saw a flash of brown fur and sharp claws. Panic seized me. I scrambled for the other side of my tent, needing to escape the chaos. My legs pumped hard, away from the shrieks and growls. Trees blurred past. I stumbled over roots, my lungs burning with each breath. The dense woods thinned, revealing an old house, dark and silent with gaping windows. I ran toward it, needing refuge from the animal. I pushed open the warped wooden door. It groaned on rusted hinges. Inside, the air was cold and musty. Dust lay thick. Dark red shapes covered the walls, geometric lines and sharp angles forming patterns. A strange altar stood in the center, adorned with symbols, dried flowers, and bones. A rustle came from the far corner. I spun, my heart hammering. A tall form stood there, completely still, made of bleached bones. No skin or muscle covered its frame, only bone. Deep hollows marked its eye sockets. It moved then, stepping into light from a broken window. It advanced. Its bones clicked as it moved, not with steps but a continuous flow across the floor. This was no animal, but an impossible hunter. The cold in the room deepened around me. The creature's bony fingers clamped around my arm. Its grip felt cold and powerful, and I could not break free. It dragged me across the floor toward the strange altar. My feet scraped over rough wood. I thrashed and screamed, but no sound came out. My throat burned. The skeletal being lifted me onto the altar, its eye sockets fixed on mine. There was no light within them, only darkness. It placed a jagged bone shard on my chest. Its touch was burning cold. It started to carve symbols into my skin with the bone shard. Pain seared through my arm as the sharp edge cut deep. I could not scream. It was not just physical agony. A cold dread seeped into my mind, something wrong and alien twisting my thoughts. Its movements were precise and deliberate. It carved a complex pattern on my forearm, a series of connected lines and strange curves. My blood welled up, tracing the new marks. It pressed its bony hand onto the bleeding design, pushing down hard. A terrible burning cold infused the wound, as if my very essence was being stitched into the pattern. This was not an attack. This felt like a grotesque offering, a twisted attempt to make me part of its realm, to bind me to its purpose through this violence. My mind fractured, unable to process the utter violation. The mark glowed briefly, then faded into a permanent scar. The feeling of utter violation remained, twisting my perception of reality. I lay there, irrevocably changed, my trauma, a persistent, incomprehensible presence. I survived the woods. The mark on my arm, the world outside felt sharp and wrong. Sleep brought no rest, only fractured images of bone and shadow. I saw the skeletal form everywhere, in the corner of my eye, just beyond the reach of light. Each passing day brought a slow, deliberate tightening around my chest. I tried to speak of what happened, but words failed me. People looked at me with pity or fear, dismissing my story as trauma-induced delusion. I retreated, desperate for understanding. I found anonymous corners of the internet. My fingers trembled over the keyboard as I typed out the impossible tale. I wrote about the bear, the house, the bone entity, and the burning cold mark. I pushed my story into the internet, hoping for recognition. For a time, I felt a strange release. Others responded. Some showed skepticism. Some shared their own accounts of impossible encounters. But the entity remained. The mark on my arm grew warmer, sometimes burning. I felt a cold breath on my neck in empty rooms. My online messages started to change. Replies came from unknown sources, fragmented words forming unsettling patterns. My screen would flicker, showing brief, distorted images of bone. I knew it watched. It had never released me. It had only expanded its presence. The torment intensified. My mind grew weary from the constant pressure, the pervasive cold. I could not escape its presence. Every waking moment was a struggle against the invisible hunter. I started to see the mark on other things, on tree bark, on city walls, twisting reality. The fear grew too much to bear. One night, I wrote my final message, a desperate plea for anyone reading to understand. I described the mark, the lingering chill, the endless pursuit. Then I made my choice, seeking an end to the unbearable cycle. My story remained online, a digital record of my suffering. My last post, detailing the entity's lingering hold, gained traction. Others started to talk about the strange symbols appearing around their cities. People shared images, their phones capturing fleeting glimpses of skeletal figures in the periphery. A few even claimed to feel the burning cold mark on their own skin, though no physical trace existed. The horror had not died with me. My desperate plea had instead given the entity a new opportunity. The entity had found new individuals to observe, new people to influence. The mark, a silent, chilling inheritance, continued to spread its inexplicable truth, leaving a persistent, unresolved mystery in its wake. Danny and I were always together. We built forts in the dense woods behind our houses, tracing the creek's winding path through the pines on long summer days. He knew every turn of the forest floor, spotting animal tracks I always missed, and pointing out birds overhead. His laughter rang out, a clear sound that always made me smile. We shared all our deepest secrets under the bright moon. Then the hunting trip with his father arrived. It happened on a cold Saturday morning, a sharp chill in the air. Danny hated those early starts, but his dad always insisted they go. They drove deep into the western woods, past old logging trails. His father returned alone after dusk, his face pale and drawn. He told the sheriff that Danny had just walked away, chasing a deer he thought he saw. Danny's father called for him for hours, searching the darkening forest, but Danny did not answer. The sheriff began an investigation. Search parties combed through the trees for days, but found nothing. Danny's father answered many difficult questions. News reporters stayed in town for a week, then drove away. The yellow ribbons tied to lampposts and trees withered in the sun and rain. People in town started talking about school, about the upcoming harvest. It seemed as if Danny had never existed. The town moved on from the event. Within weeks, no one spoke his name aloud anymore. They continued their lives as if a vital part of our community had not gone missing. A gnawing unease settled deep in my stomach, refusing to release its hold. I missed him every single day, and the town's quick acceptance felt like a betrayal. Months stretched into an empty season. The woods behind my house felt different without Danny there, no secret paths to explore. My own steps echoed a hollow sound. Then, one Tuesday morning, Mrs. Gable mentioned Danny's name. His math homework had arrived in her mailbox, completed. Due dates still met. She asked if anyone knew where Danny was, a puzzled look on her face. A few days later, his English essay appeared, then his science project. The town buzzed with quiet talk. His parents had always been private people. They offered vague explanations, speaking of a long-lasting viral infection, a difficult recovery that needed isolation. People nodded, accepting the simple explanation, glad to have a reason for the missing boy. Finally, a late Tuesday afternoon, I saw him. Danny walked through the school doors, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His skin looked pale. He did not smile when our eyes met across the crowded hallway. A knot formed in my stomach. The other kids surrounded him, shouting his name, slapping his back, asking where he had been. He mumbled short answers, his voice a low rasp. It was completely different from the clear sound I once knew. He moved with deliberation, his steps careful. His body held itself rigidly. He sat next to me in history class, just like before. I watched his hands. They rested on his desk, fingers spread wide, unmoving. He did not doodle in the margins of his notebook or tap his pencil. The clock on the wall above the blackboard seemed to capture his attention. He checked it every few minutes, then glanced at the window, then back to the clock. His eyes held a worried look. Mrs. Gable began her lecture on the colonial period. Danny shifted in his seat, a subtle movement, but it looked painful. During lunch, he picked at his food, pushing a sandwich around his plate. He did not eat. His eyes kept darting towards the windows, towards the light outside, tracking the sun's slow descent. "Are you feeling better?" I asked him, my voice quiet. He looked at me, his eyes wide, then he quickly looked away. He did not answer. The conversation around us continued, a normal lunch period, full of cheerful chatter. No one else seemed to notice Danny's silent struggle, his focus on the setting sun. As the afternoon wore on, his anxiety grew. In science class, the late autumn light began to fade, casting long shadows across the room. Danny's entire body tensed. He gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. His breathing became shallow and fast. He glanced at the clock with frequency, his head moving stiffly from the window to the numbers on the dial. The last bell rang, startling him. He jumped from his seat, not even gathering his books. He bolted out the door, moving with a stiff gait. He pushed past other students, racing down the hall. His parents met him at the curb every single day. They waited in their old pickup truck, watching the school doors with scrutiny. Danny would practically throw himself into the passenger seat, not bothering with a wave or a goodbye. His parents never looked at anyone else. They just stared ahead, their faces grim, their eyes fixed on the road once Danny was inside. The truck would then speed away, leaving a swirl of dust. The town, as always, chose to ignore these odd occurrences. They just saw a boy who had returned, a family now complete. They did not see the terror in Danny's eyes, the rigidity of his movements, or the parents who seemed to guard him against the fading light. Only I saw these things. The gnawing unease from his disappearance had returned, now laced with fear. The sun dipped low, painting the western sky in stark oranges and purples as the old pickup truck pulled away from the school. I watched it disappear down the road, the dust settling slowly. My unease had grown into a cold certainty, a desperate need for answers. Danny was not himself. His parents guarded a terrible secret, and I knew it. I could not just let it go. Instead of walking the usual path home, I veered off, cutting through Mr. Henderson's overgrown field. The shortcut brought me out a few blocks from Danny's house. Their property stood back from the road, surrounded by tall, dark pines. I approached with caution, my steps quiet on the gravel driveway. The last sliver of sunlight had almost vanished from the sky. I saw the truck parked outside the back door of their house. His parents emerged, one on each side of Danny. They pulled him from the cab with urgent, rough movements. Danny did not walk. His body was a rigid column, his arms hanging stiff at his sides. His head lolled forward onto his chest. He made a low, choking sound, a grunt of distress. They half carried, half dragged him towards the door, his feet scraping on the ground. They moved with a desperate urgency, glancing at the darkening sky, their faces etched with a visible terror I had never seen on them before. The door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the last weak light that had clung to the eaves. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew then that I could not leave. I walked to their front door and rapped my knuckles hard against the wood. The sound echoed in the growing darkness. I waited, listening. I heard muffled voices from inside, then the click of a lock. The door opened a crack. Mrs. Peterson peered out, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice thin. "I need to see Danny," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "He is resting," she replied, trying to push the door closed. "He is not feeling well." I put my hand on the doorframe, stopping it. "I saw you," I said. "I saw you dragging him inside." Her face hardened. Mr. Peterson appeared behind her, his posture stiff, his eyes avoiding mine. "You need to go home," he commanded, his voice deep and stern. I pushed the door open, stepping inside. The small living room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. A chill filled the air, not the cold of outside, but a deeper, stagnant cold. "Where is he?" I demanded. Mr. Peterson grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "You cannot be here," he hissed. Suddenly, a low, guttural groan rose from beneath our feet. The sound came from the floorboards, vibrating through the house. It was a sound of suffering, a sound not quite human. I tore my arm free and moved towards the kitchen, where a narrow door stood slightly ajar. I knew it led to the basement. "Danny!" I called out. Mrs. Peterson cried out my name, but I ignored her. I pushed the basement door open and started down the creaking wooden steps. The air in the stairwell was thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic and sweet. A bare light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a weak yellow glow over the concrete floor. Danny lay on a cot against the far wall. Thick leather straps bound his wrists and ankles to the metal frame. His eyes were wide and unfocused, darting around the basement like a trapped animal. His mouth hung open. A trickle of dark fluid, almost black, stained the corner of his lips. The fluid glistened in the dim light. His skin was pale, stretched taut over his sharp cheekbones. His clothes were rumpled and torn. I knelt beside the cot. "Danny," I whispered, my voice breaking. His parents descended the stairs behind me. Their faces were defeated. Mr. Peterson sank onto a wooden crate, his head in his hands. Mrs. Peterson stood by the bottom step, her shoulders slumped. "He died," she said, her voice raw. Her words sliced through the air, sharp and absolute. "In the woods. His father found him first, but by then it was too late." My mind reeled. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "He wasn't breathing," she continued, her gaze fixed on a distant point. "His body was cold. We brought him home. We couldn't lose him." Mr. Peterson made a strangled sound, a sob catching in his throat. "There was a way," Mrs. Peterson went on, her eyes now burning with a desperate light. "An old book, a ritual, to bring him back, not truly back. He is a vessel now, a shell." "A vessel for what?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "It lives inside him," she explained, gesturing vaguely towards Danny's still form. "It needs the dark. It needs sustenance." She looked at the stain on Danny's lips. "Blood. To keep it dormant until morning." "Dormant?" I repeated, the word chilling me. "It transforms," Mr. Peterson said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "At sundown, every night, he becomes something else. Something monstrous." As he spoke, the light bulb above us flickered once, then died, plunging the basement into near total darkness. A single beam of moonlight cut through a small, grimy window high on the wall. The last trace of daylight had finally vanished. Danny began to stir on the cot. A low groan rumbled deep in his chest. His body tensed, the leather straps groaning under the sudden strain. His skin, already pale, began to darken, taking on a gray, mottled appearance. His fingers twitched, then curled, growing thicker, wider. The nails elongated, becoming rough, pointed shards. I watched in horrified fascination as his skin started to crack. Thin fissures appeared across his face, spreading down his neck and arms. The cracks deepened, revealing a strange, fibrous material beneath, a dark, woody substance. It looked like bark. His eyes rolled back, showing only whites. His jaw unhinged, dropping open to an impossible angle. A long, black tongue, rough and corrugated, lolled from his mouth. A branch-like protrusion erupted from his shoulder, tearing through his shirt with a sharp rip. Another pushed through his ribs, splintering bone and flesh. His limbs thickened, twisting into grotesque, knotty shapes. His legs buckled, bones audibly cracking and reforming, turning into thick, gnarled roots that strained against the leather bindings. The transformation was slow, agonizing, yet relentless. Splinters of wood burst from his growing mass, the air filled with the scent of fresh sap and dark earth. Danny's human form was consumed, replaced by a monstrous arboreal creature, its gnarled body straining against the cot, its eyes now glowing with a malevolent green light. The thing that had been Danny was gone. Only the wood remained. The creature on the cot thrashed, its newly formed root-like limbs straining and tearing at the leather straps. Its green eyes locked onto mine, a primal hunger blazing within their depths. A guttural screech, ancient and terrible, ripped from its gaping, bark-lined maw. My loyalty to Danny, to my friend, surged through the horror, blinding me to the danger. I could not leave him bound. I scanned the dim basement. A rusty utility knife lay on a nearby workbench. I snatched it. Danny's parents watched me, their faces mirroring a mixture of terror and despair. They made no move to stop me. With trembling hands, I approached the cot. The creature lunged, its gnarled fingers tearing at the air inches from my face. I recoiled, but then steeled myself. I saw a thick strap binding its left ankle. I plunged the knife down, sawing frantically at the hardened leather. The strap snapped with a loud crack. The creature's freed leg kicked out, splintering the cot's frame. It ripped its other limbs free with astonishing force, tearing through the remaining restraints. The leather pieces flew across the basement. The monstrous form stood, unfolding to a height far greater than Danny's, its woody limbs reaching towards the low ceiling. It moved with a sickening crunch of shifting bark and reforming wood. It let out another piercing shriek. Mr. Peterson moved then, no longer defeated. His eyes held a terrible purpose. He stumbled towards a dark corner of the basement, grabbing 2 red gasoline cans. The metallic clang echoed. Mrs. Peterson stood frozen for a moment. Then she began to help him. They moved with a practiced, desperate choreography. They uncapped the cans. The sharp, acrid scent of gasoline filled the air, mingling with the earthy smell of sap. They began to douse the concrete floor, splashing the liquid over the cot, over the walls, coating everything in its volatile sheen. The creature roared, a sound that shook the very foundation of the house. It lunged towards them, a blur of dark wood and glowing green eyes. I saw its gnarled hand connect with Mr. Peterson's shoulder. He cried out, falling backward, but he still clutched one of the gasoline cans. Mrs. Peterson screamed, throwing the second can down. It skittered across the floor, sloshing its contents. "Run!" Mr. Peterson screamed at me, his voice a desperate rasp. "Get out! Now!" Mrs. Peterson reached into her pocket. Her hand emerged with a small silver lighter. Her face was grim, her eyes fixed on the monstrous thing that had once been her son. She flicked it open. The tiny flame flared to life, a stark point of orange against the dark. The creature was almost upon them, its branches reaching. Its roar echoed. I did not think. I bolted. I scrambled up the wooden basement stairs, my lungs burning, my legs pumping. The gasoline fumes were overwhelming. Behind me, I heard a terrible wet crunch, then a defiant, piercing scream from Mrs. Peterson. I reached the kitchen door. My hand closed on the doorknob. I wrenched it open. A sudden, whooshing roar erupted from below. The entire basement exploded in a blinding flash of orange light. The heat slammed into my back, shoving me forward. The house groaned around me. The kitchen floor buckled. I stumbled out of the house, not even closing the door behind me. I ran without looking back, my ears ringing with the sound of the inferno, the crackling flames, and the echoing, dying screams of Danny's parents. I did not stop running until I reached the edge of the woods, far from their property. I sank to my knees in the dirt, gasping, shaking. The orange glow of the fire lit the night sky behind me. The terrible knowledge of what I had done, what they had done, burned hotter in my mind. I had freed it. They had sacrificed themselves, not just to contain it, but to destroy it, to stop the horror they had unleashed. Their desperate sacrifice, their final act of love and despair, became a crushing weight in my chest. The monstrous thing, the wood-like horror, was gone, consumed by fire. But the searing guilt remained, a permanent scar on my soul. I was alive, but I carried the full weight of the unspeakable secret, the burning truth of that night. The fire department arrived soon after, sirens wailing through the night. Flames consumed the Peterson house, a furious orange spectacle against the dark sky. Investigators quickly declared faulty wiring as the cause. They searched the debris for days, finding no human remains. Danny and his parents were officially listed as missing, presumed lost in the blaze. The town mourned briefly, accepting the tragic accident. No one questioned the simple explanation. I watched the investigations from a distance. The truth burned in my mind, but I offered no answers. My throat closed. The horrifying knowledge felt too immense to utter. I carried the unspeakable secret, a heavy, constant burden. My shoulders hunched with the unseen weight every waking moment, every difficult breath. I saw the empty space where the Peterson house once stood, now just a charred foundation, and the crushing secret grew. Night brought no peace. My house offered little comfort. I began to hear it, almost immediately. A soft, dry tapping against my bedroom window began each night. The sound came from the side of the house where no large trees grew. It was irregular, persistent. Sometimes it was a single gentle rap, then a pause, then another. Other nights it became a rhythmic scrape, like something dragging wood across the glass. I pulled my curtains tightly closed, but the sound always seeped through. I lay awake for hours, my heart pounding, listening for the movement outside, the creak of the floorboards below. I knew it was him, or the thing that wore his skin. A chill spread through my body. I listened to the sounds, trying to discern its purpose, its nature. Was it seeking me? Was it trying to get in? The possibility made my body tense. The uncertainty consumed my thoughts. Had I saved Danny by freeing the monster, allowing his parents to destroy it in the fire? Or had I simply unleashed it upon the world, condemning our quiet town to an unimaginable evil? Every dry tap against my window, every rustle in the dark outside, was a terrifying reminder. I lived with the horrifying question, staring into the dark, listening to the incessant tapping, never knowing if the fire had ended the horror or merely set it free. The aisle stretched too long before me, its perfect length creating an unnatural tunnel. I walked slowly, my dress rustling around my ankles, and observed the faces in the pews. They wore smiles, fixed and wide, but their eyes held no warmth. The applause began then, a sparse scattering of sound that evaporated into the large room, leaving a quiet void. Victor stood waiting, his posture straight, a bright grin on his face. His eyes, though, held a flat expression, a deep disconnect from the joy his mouth projected. He reached for my hand, his grip firm, a practiced gesture. Everything felt rehearsed, like a scene performed many times before, each movement precise. The entire moment was beautiful, yet it lacked a true beat. This flawless picture seemed to cover something else, an unnervingly artificial event from its very start. The reception hall sparkled with lights and music. I moved through the room, Victor's hand a constant presence on my lower back. I tried to engage with guests, catching snippets of conversation. A woman spoke of her trip to Italy, then immediately discussed the weather forecast. Her words held no connection. Another guest described a childhood memory abruptly shifting to a detailed explanation of their current job. The topics changed too fast, and the words did not connect. People spoke at each other, not with each other. I found Clara, my maid of honor, near the cake table. Her usual vibrant complexion was gone. Her skin was pale. Her eyes darted around the room, fixed on no object. She held her bouquet too tightly, crushing the delicate petals. I asked her if she felt well. Her response was a single, mumbled word I could not understand, and then she turned away. "Is something wrong?" I whispered to Victor, my unease growing. His head snapped toward me, his smile fixed. "No, darling, everything is perfect. The best day." His words came too fast, a practiced reassurance, delivered before I had even finished my question. His hand tightened on my back, urging me forward. I felt a shift in the crowd. A group of guests stood by the window, then a moment later they were closer to the band. They simply occupied new spaces. My head turned quickly to follow the movement, but it stopped as soon as I looked directly. The arrangement of bodies changed, just at the edge of my vision. It happened again, a quiet reordering of people. They stood in different spots, though I never saw them move. My gaze drifted toward the head table. Fewer guests now sat there. A chair, still neatly tucked beneath, stood empty. I tried to recall who had occupied that spot, tried to remember them leaving, but the memory was simply not there. My eyes swept across the room. Another table, closer to the band, now held 2 empty places. I could not picture those guests walking away. The chairs stood vacant, their purpose unfulfilled. An unnerving, sweet scent began to spread through the hall. It grew stronger, a thick presence in the air. It coated my tongue. I saw a groomsman standing by the far wall. He stood still, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular across the room. His eyes held a vacant look. He wore a crisp charcoal suit. I watched him for a moment, my attention drawn to his stillness among the moving crowd. The music played on around him, yet he remained motionless. Then, in the span of a single breath, he was gone. My eyes registered the empty space where he had stood. His jacket hung on the back of a nearby chair, its fabric still holding the shape of shoulders. The stark absence made my breath catch in my throat. A cold dread solidified within me. This was not a subtle shift in the crowd. This was a disturbing vanishing. The music continued, its endless, perfect rotation of notes. Victor's hand tightened on my waist, pulling me close. We moved together across the polished floor. My gaze swept past the rapidly emptying tables, deliberately avoiding a tally of the spaces where no one stood. Each time my vision threatened to fix on a vacant spot, I shifted my focus to the patterns of the lights on the ceiling, to the steady movement of our feet. Victor leaned his mouth close to my ear. "Everything is perfect, Lilith," he whispered, his voice steady. "This is our day. Nothing is wrong." His words provided a clear directive in the increasing emptiness. I felt his breath warm against my skin. I looked into his eyes. A desperate understanding passed between us, a silent agreement without spoken words. His gaze met mine, confirming the unspoken choice. We moved, not acknowledging the increasing absences around us. We simply kept dancing. Our steps continued in perfect time, ignoring the horrific reality that pressed in on all sides. We were a single unit, moving in a hall that emptied steadily, choosing to believe the world remained as it should be. The mountain storm lashed at us, tearing through our inadequate jackets. Rain plastered our hair and the wind bit into exposed skin. We had been walking for hours, our phones dead, the last signal vanishing miles ago. Each step felt heavier on the muddy path, and cold seeped into our clothes. We saw no road or any human sign, just endless rain-swept trees. Then, through a break in the downpour, Mark pointed toward something. A dark shape emerged from the swirling gray mist ahead. It was an old house, leaning to one side, its broken windows showing dark interiors. Desperate hope arose within our exhausted group. We scrambled towards it, pushing through overgrown bushes and a broken gate. The front door stood open on rusty hinges. We pushed it wider and stumbled inside, shaking off water and cold. The air felt stale but dry, a welcome change from the storm outside. An absolute quietness filled the space. No sound came from any direction. It was a complete absence of expected noise. We were dry, sheltered from the elements, but the quiet was unlike anything we had ever experienced. We scattered through the first floor, exploring the vacant rooms. Mark found a door at the back of what seemed to be a dining room. He pulled on its tarnished handle, but the door did not move. He pushed it, then he pressed his ear against the aged wood, but no sound came through the thick panel. He noticed a narrow crack running along the frame, where the wood had warped over time. He bent down and peered into the darkness within. He drew a sharp breath. "What is it?" Maya asked, her voice hushed. Mark straightened up, his eyes wide. "It is red," he said simply. "Completely red inside." We gathered around, a common curiosity drawing us forward. Mark stepped aside, allowing each of us a turn. I bent down, placing my eye close to the crack. The view was startling. Every surface beyond the door was a deep crimson. There was no shape, no shadow, just an unbroken expanse of red. The color filled the space, intense and unyielding, absorbing any light that might have entered. It gave the impression of infinite depth, a solid block of color behind the obstacle. What could that be? Sarah asked, her brow deeply furrowed. Liam peered in next. "Perhaps it is a dark room for photography," he suggested, though he sounded uncertain. "Someone might have painted everything inside that strange color." Maya took her turn, placing her eye to the crack. She drew back slowly, her head tilted, and her voice held a new uncertainty. "It is just red," she confirmed, stating the obvious with a tremor. "It is probably just very old, red wallpaper that had faded," I said, attempting to sound logical. "Or thick curtains, red in color, pressed right up against the door." The red was deep and complete. The others nodded, clinging to those rationalizations. A dark room seemed the only comfortable explanation for the unsettling view. We stood there, staring at the old, stuck door, the crimson color behind it, a strange puzzle in the unsettling quiet of the house. The storm broke, sunlight piercing ragged clouds. We emerged from the ancient house into the chilled air. We followed an overgrown track until a plume of smoke rose in the distance, a sign of human life. We reached a town, spotting a diner with a flickering open sign. The warmth inside enveloped us, a contrast to the biting mountain air. The aroma of frying bacon and hot coffee filled the space. We slid into a worn booth. A woman with kind eyes placed menus before us. We ordered everything, savoring hot food. The past hour's stress began to melt away. Laughter, low and soft, returned to our group, a sound alien after the house's oppressive quiet. Mark leaned back, a satisfied sigh escaping him. "That house was something else, right?" he said. "Especially that weird red room. I still cannot figure out what that was all about." His words, spoken casually, cut through the diner's gentle murmur. Cutlery stopped clinking. Voices died in mid-sentence. The waitress, refilling coffee at the counter, froze, her hand gripping the pot, coffee still running into an empty mug. The diner owner, thick mustache by the grill, slowly turned, his spatula clattering softly onto the griddle. Every person in the room looked at us, faces devoid of color, eyes wide and fixed. The owner slowly approached our table, his heavy work boots thudding on the tiled floor. He wiped his hands on a clean towel, his gaze fixed on Mark. His eyes, usually crinkled with good humor, now held an unsettling sadness. "The old house?" the owner asked, his voice a low rumble. "Up the mountain path? The one with the broken gate?" Mark nodded, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Yes, that is the one," he confirmed. "We sheltered there during the storm." The owner looked at each of us, his gaze lingering. "People around here, they have stories about that house," he began, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Old stories passed down from their grandfathers. They say strange things happened there. The people who lived there a long time ago, they had red eyes, just like raw meat or fresh blood. People sometimes saw them through the windows, or if the door was open just a crack, they were always looking back, watching." A cold dread coiled in my stomach. The diner's sudden quiet pressed in on us, a heavy blanket. My mind raced back to the old house, to the stuck door. I remembered peering through the narrow crack, seeing that complete crimson. The owner's words crushed our comfortable rationalizations. That intense red, a color unyielding in its depth, was a massive eye, and there was only one. It had been looking back at me. It had watched each of us, one after the other, as we bent down, placing our own eyes to that narrow opening. We had peered into its gaze. It had peered into ours. Its crimson stared back from the other side, silent and unwavering, watching us with ancient patience, a patience that held horror. The terrifying implication of our discovery solidified into a sickening certainty. Something lived behind that door, something with a massive, blood-red eye, and it knew we had been there. The mud outside Berlin held our boots tight, but it could not hold the fear. German lines were a distant memory. Something worse clawed at the city's edge. They came from the smoke, shambling figures in tattered uniforms. Their skin hung in strips and their eyes were hollow sockets. Rifle fire ripped through their chests, tearing ugly holes, yet they never fell. They simply kept walking forward, their broken jaws snapping at the air. No human could move like that. No dead man should rise. Our bullets, standard lead, tore gaping holes in the rotten flesh of these things. The rounds simply passed through without effect, and the creatures kept their relentless pace. We aimed for their heads, for their crumbling joints, but the lead did nothing to stop them. They were like puppets on invisible strings, driven by a terrible alien will. Desperation tightened its grip on every man. The air itself began to twist. A black tear opened in the sky above the shattered city. We called this tear the Rip. From within its jagged edges poured forth the others. These entities were formless, spectral things. They howled with a sound that clawed at our sanity. They drifted through our defensive lines, leaving cold spots and a stench of graves. Regular ammunition did not touch these apparitions either. Our rifles became useless instruments of noise against an enemy that defied all understanding. The Rip pulsed with an unnatural light, and more of them emerged. Then came the silver. Commissars handed out the precious silver rounds, their faces grim. Each bullet was a fortune, but a necessary one. We loaded the silver into our magazines, our hands shaking from the cold and the fear. The next wave of shambling dead came, their numbers vast and endless. We fired, and this time the silver rounds tore into them, burning. The puppeted corpses shrieked a dry, rattling sound as the metal seared their rotted forms. They convulsed, and then they finally fell, not to rise again. The spectral things were harder to hit. They darted and weaved, but a direct strike from a silver round made them scream a sound of pure agony. The hit parts of their forms shimmered and then dissipated, but the rest remained. They still howled, still clawed at our minds, but at least we had a weapon that could touch them. We kept firing the costly silver, our faces streaked with grime and sweat. The battle raged on without end. The fallen abominations rebuilt themselves if left untended. New corpses rose from the ruined earth, and more spectral horrors poured from the Rip. The war for Berlin had become a nightmare. This new reality was a cold, unending horror. The spectral things shrieked when our silver rounds tore into them. Parts of their forms dissipated into a misty vapor. This vapor, fine, hung in the cold air, drifting through our lines. We breathed it in. Every gasp for air, every ragged intake during the fight, pulled it into our lungs. Our gas masks offered no protection from this insidious presence. The filters could not catch the corrupted air. A slow sickness began in us. It started with a persistent cough that rasped in our throats. A burning sensation settled in our chests. Our energy drained away, leaving us weary. Private Kostenko's eyes grew bloodshot. His skin took on a strange gray pallor. He whispered that his insides. We saw the changes in each other's faces. Our cheeks became hollow, our lips cracked. Major Ivanov developed dark purple bruises on his forearms. They spread slowly, darkening his skin. He called himself poisoned. The corruption ate at us from within. Sergeant Grigori began to tremble. His teeth became loose in his gums. He could not hold his rifle steady. We knew what was happening. We were contaminated. The whispered truth moved through the ranks. A terrible secret passed between men huddling in the mud. Commanders walked past the ailing men. They kept their gaze fixed on the enemy lines. No one spoke of our internal decay in official reports. We were just soldiers fighting a war. But we were something else too. We were dead men walking, condemned by the air we breathed. Our doom was not in the bullet or the spectral claw. It was already inside us. I scratched my pen across the thin paper, the words spilling onto the page for Katerin. My hand shook with an internal tremor as I wrote. I told her to go north, far away from this place where the corruption spread, knowing it was already too late for me. I confessed I would not come home to her. A terrible ache spread through my chest as I pictured her face, her warm smile, understanding I would never see her again. My warning was a desperate plea for her life, a final act of love before my own end. The bugle sounded for the dawn assault. Men stirred from their shallow holes. Their gaunt faces showed the gray pallor of the dying in the dim light. We all shared a terrible knowledge, a silent understanding. Our lungs burned with the vapor. Our blood was tainted from within. We were dead men walking, marching towards a city of the dead. There was no escape from the doom already inside us. We picked up our rifles, the heavy silver rounds weighing down our pouches, and began to move. I folded the letter with care, holding it close to my uniform. Commissar Yetsov appeared beside me, his boots making no sound on the mud. His cold gaze scanned my face. He extended a hand without a word. My heart hammered against my ribs as he took the letter from my grasp. He did not open it. He tucked it into his tunic pocket. Hope left me then, a final weight settling in my chest. My last message, my desperate warning, would never reach her. The order came to advance. We moved forward into the smoke-filled ruins, each step heavy, each breath burning in our lungs. The spectral howls carried on the wind, growing louder as we approached the shattered buildings. The shambling things waited for us within the ruins. We knew our end was coming. We knew the air would finish us. The city stood before us, promising our inevitable doom, and we marched towards it as condemned men.